I still remember the sound of the key turning in the lock. That soft click followed by the heavy silence of our house on Maple Street. At 13, I had mastered the art of being invisible, of calculating the exact pressure needed to place my backpack on the floor without making a noise. Some kids ran home after school. I walked as slowly as possible, counting the cracks in the sidewalk, inventing errands that didn't exist. My name is Ethan Miller, and from the outside, we were the perfect family. Dad worked at the bank downtown, respected, always dressed in crisp suits with perfect Windsor knots. Mom volunteered at the church and baked cookies for bake sales. We lived in a 2-story colonial with a swing set in the backyard that no one used anymore. A picture-perfect suburban dream that felt more like quicksand with each passing day. That afternoon in October, the house seemed quieter than usual. The hallway stretched before me, picture frames lining the walls, smiling faces that told lies about who we really were. Photos from family vacations where Dad's smile never reached his eyes, where Mom's hand trembled slightly holding the camera. Moments frozen in time that outsiders would call happiness. "Ethan, is that you?" Mom's voice drifted from the kitchen, thin and fragile like tissue paper. "Yeah, it's me." I dropped my voice an octave, trying to sound casual, normal. When I rounded the corner into the kitchen, Mom was standing by the sink, frantically scrubbing a pot that already looked spotless. Her movements were jerky, mechanical. I recognized the signs immediately. Dad had been in one of his moods before leaving for work. "How was school?" she asked without turning around, her knuckles white against the scouring pad. "Fine." The word hung between us, heavy with everything I wasn't saying. How could I tell her about winning first place in the science fair when her cheek bore the faint shadow of what would become a bruise by evening? The kitchen clock ticked loudly. 5 hours until Dad came home. 5 hours of freedom, if you could call this freedom. "I made chicken pot pie," Mom said, finally turning to face me. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing the mark I'd already noticed. "Your father's favorite." As if making his favorite meal would change anything. As if perfectly folded laundry or spotless floors or straight-A report cards ever made a difference. I nodded and mumbled something about homework. Mom's eyes followed me as I moved toward the stairs, filled with the same desperate hope that never died, despite everything. The hope that tomorrow would be different, that Dad would finally change, that someone would notice the careful way we moved through our lives, like dancers avoiding invisible tripwires. My bedroom was the only place I felt safe. Blue walls, a desk by the window overlooking Mrs. Patterson's rose garden next door. I'd arranged everything strategically. The bed pushed against the wall so I could hear anyone approaching, a chair wedged under the doorknob at night. Small protections that probably wouldn't matter if Dad decided my room was where he wanted to unleash his demons that evening. I pulled out my notebook. Not homework, but the journal my English teacher, Mrs. Wallace, had given me. "Write it down," she'd said, after catching me staring blankly out the window for the 3rd time that week. "Whatever it is, putting it on paper helps." She didn't know. Nobody knew. But I wrote anyway, filling pages with words I could never speak aloud. Stories about a boy trapped in a beautiful house with monsters disguised as parents. Fantasies about running away, about someone breaking down our door and saying the words I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. "You don't have to live like this anymore." The house creaked and settled around me as afternoon light filtered through my blinds. 4 hours and 30 minutes until Dad came home. I kept writing. I kept writing until my hand cramped, only stopping when I heard the garage door rumble open. The sound sent an electric jolt through my body. Dad was home early. My pen froze mid-sentence as I listened to the familiar sequence. Car door slamming, heavy footsteps, keys jangling. I quickly tucked my journal under the mattress and pulled out my math textbook instead. Homework was safe. Homework was expected. "Rebecca!" Dad's voice boomed from downstairs. Not angry yet, but the night was young. I heard Mom's hurried footsteps, the forced cheerfulness in her voice. "You're home early, David. Dinner's almost ready." "Where's Ethan?" The question made my stomach twist. "Upstairs, doing homework." A moment of silence followed. Then the creak of the stairs. Each footstep drew closer, like a countdown to an explosion. I hunched over my textbook, pretending to be absorbed in quadratic equations. My door swung open without a knock. We didn't have the luxury of privacy in this house. "Hey, son." Dad stood in the doorway, his suit jacket already removed, tie loosened. He seemed calm, but I'd learned long ago that calm didn't mean safe. "Hi, Dad." I kept my eyes on my book. He sat on the edge of my bed, and I felt the mattress dip under his weight. "How's school?" "Good. I got an A on my history test." "Just an A? Not an A plus?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm kidding. That's good, Ethan." His hand rested on my shoulder, and it took everything in me not to flinch. This was how it always started. The casual touch, the seemingly normal conversation that could veer into dangerous territory with one wrong word. "Come down for dinner soon," he said, standing up. "Your mother's made something special." After he left, I released the breath I'd been holding. Maybe tonight would be okay. Maybe the pot pie would be perfect, and Dad would be in a good mood, and we could pretend to be normal for one evening. Dinner began peacefully enough. Mom served the food with shaking hands while Dad talked about work, a new client, an incompetent colleague. We nodded and made appropriate sounds of interest, like actors in a play we'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Then, halfway through the meal, Dad took a bite and froze. "Rebecca," he said, setting down his fork with deliberate slowness. "This is undercooked." Mom's face drained of color. "I'm sorry, David, I thought—" "You thought what? That I wouldn't notice?" His voice remained eerily calm. "You've been making this dish for 15 years. How do you still mess it up?" "I can heat it up more," she offered, already rising from her chair. "Sit down." The command was quiet but left no room for argument. "We'll eat it as is, since you clearly don't care enough to do it right the first time." I stared at my plate, pushing the food around with my fork. The chicken was perfectly cooked. We all knew that. This wasn't about dinner. It never was. "Ethan," Dad said suddenly, "how's that science project coming along? The one for the fair?" "It's done. I got first place today." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Dad's eyebrows raised. "First place? And you didn't think to mention this earlier?" I forgot." "You forgot." He laughed coldly. "Your first accomplishment in months, and you forgot. Or maybe you didn't think it was important enough to tell your father." "No, that's not— Do you know what I think?" He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "I think you're becoming just like your mother. Careless, thoughtless." "David, please," Mom whispered. "He's just a boy. A boy who needs to learn respect." Dad's fist came down on the table, making the plates jump. "Is that what they teach you at that school? To keep secrets from your family?" Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was seeing Mom's face, resigned to what was coming. Maybe it was the way my science fair ribbon was crumpled in my pocket, the accomplishment already tainted. Or maybe it was just 13 years of fear finally combusting into something else. "Nothing happens at school," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's here. It's always here." Dad's eyes narrowed. "What did you just say to me?" I should have backed down, should have apologized. Instead, I stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Ethan," Mom pleaded, "please." But the words were already pouring out, unstoppable as a flash flood. "Mrs. Wallace asked about my bruise last week, the one you said was from falling down the stairs. She didn't believe me." The silence that followed was deafening. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face transformed, first shock, then a terrible calm that was more frightening than any shouting. "What else have you been telling people?" His voice was ice. Mom stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "Ethan, go to your room." "No." The word felt foreign on my tongue. I'd never directly disobeyed before. Dad rose slowly, looming over the table. You think anyone will believe you? The son of David Miller? I'm a pillar of this community. David, please, he didn't mean... Mom started. The slap came so fast I barely saw it happen. One moment Mom was speaking, the next she was clutching her cheek, eyes wide with shock but not surprise. Never surprise. Something in me snapped completely. I lunged forward without thinking, inserting myself between them. Don't touch her! Dad looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You dare! Yes, I dare! My voice cracked, but I kept going. I've kept your secrets for years. We both have. But I'm done. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The ancient flip phone Mom had insisted I carry for emergencies. This certainly qualified. What do you think you're doing? Dad's voice dropped dangerously low. Calling 911. My thumb hovered over the buttons. His laugh was hollow. And tell them what? That your father disciplines his family? That I expect respect in my own home? I'll show them the pictures. The words tumbled out, a secret I'd kept even from Mom. Every bruise, every accident. I've been documenting everything for months. The color drained from Dad's face. Behind me, Mom made a small, broken sound. Mrs. Wallace helped me, I continued, the lie coming easily. She knows. And if anything happens to me or Mom tonight, the photos go straight to the police. It wasn't entirely true. I had the photos, hidden in an app disguised as a calculator on my phone. But Mrs. Wallace didn't know the full extent of what was happening. Still, the bluff worked. Dad took a step back, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time I could remember. You're bluffing, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me. I opened my phone, fingers trembling but determined. What followed was the longest night of my life. Dad left the house, tires squealing as he drove away. Mom sat at the kitchen table, silent tears streaming down her face, both devastated and relieved. I called the one person I knew might help, Mrs. Wallace, and through broken sobs, finally told her everything. The next 48 hours passed in a blur, police officers asking gentle questions in our living room. Mom, initially hesitant, finally showing them the bruises she'd hidden beneath long sleeves for years. My photo evidence, transferred from my phone to an officer's laptop. Dad, returning home drunk to find police cars in the driveway, his carefully constructed facade crumbling as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. 2 months later, Mom and I sat in a small apartment across town. The restraining order against Dad was taped to our refrigerator. The divorce proceedings had begun. Mom had found a job at a local bookstore, and her smile, though still fragile, was becoming more genuine each day. I'm sorry, she said one evening as we ate takeout Chinese food on our second-hand couch. I should have protected you better. I shook my head. We protected each other the best we could. She reached out, squeezing my hand. You saved us, Ethan. Your courage saved us both. Mrs. Wallace had helped us find a support group. Twice a week we sat in a circle with other survivors, sharing stories of homes that had become traps and how we'd found our way out. Sometimes I spoke, sometimes I just listened. But each time, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. My journal, once filled with dark fantasies of escape, now chronicled our journey toward healing. The nightmares still came sometimes. Dad's footsteps on the stairs, the sound of breaking glass, the sickening thud of fist against flesh. But they were becoming less frequent, less vivid. 1 year after that night, I stood at the podium during a community event for domestic violence awareness. My hands trembled as I unfolded my speech, but my voice remained steady as I began to speak. My name is Ethan Miller. For 13 years, I lived in a beautiful house that felt like a prison. In the audience, Mom wiped away tears, nodding encouragement. Beside her sat Mrs. Wallace, the teacher who had seen beyond my silence. In the back row, other families from our support group listened, some nodding in recognition of a pain they knew too well. The trap that had been our home was broken now. The silence that had protected our abuser had been shattered. And in that breaking, we had finally found our freedom. As I finished speaking, the applause washed over me like a cleansing rain. We weren't perfect. Mom still flinched at loud noises, and I still slept with my bedroom door locked. But we were healing. And most importantly, we were telling our story. Because some traps can only be dismantled when exposed to the light.
Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more interesting content coming soon.